What's up everybody? You're here with the Fly Guy. Today I'm going to be providing you with 3 tips to help you step up your carp fly fishing game and bring more fish to the net next time you go out and target these awesome game fish. Before we get started, I just want to say that everything that I'm going to be sharing with you in this video is an approach. It is a method. It is not an absolute. Consider these tips as a jumping off point, something to get you started, and if it fits your waters and the fish that you typically target on a regular basis, go ahead and stick with it. If you need to adjust it a little bit, go for it. That's the beauty of these tips, is that they're moldable. And as a fly angler, in order to grow and to be able to up your game a little bit and be able to target multiple species of fish in diverse bodies of water and environments, you gotta be moldable, you gotta be able to adapt. That's what's gonna separate you from the pack and be able to bring more fish to the net, regardless of the species that you're targeting. I'm going to be posting more videos on fly fishing for carp and various other species of fish. I'm also going to be posting fly tying demos and fly fishing videos from my time on the water, so if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe and hit that button below. You don't want to miss what's coming next. Okay, tip number 1. When you're fly fishing for carp, most of their feeding behavior is below the surface of the water. This is with most fish. They're not feeding on the surface every second of every day. So you need to be using a 6-foot fluorocarbon leader. When you're fly fishing for carp, most of the time you're going to be fishing them in shallow water environments that have a lot of debris, and you can see the fish or you can see their feeding behavior. That includes a mud or mud slick, a mud cloud, and ripples in the water if they have their backs exposed. These fish are very shallow most days when you are targeting them as a fly angler. You need to be able to see their feeding behavior and be able to place the fly within that little radius, about an 8-inch circle or a pie plate, right around their head. The majority of the fish that I target feed below the surface 99.9% of the time, and even when they feed on the surface, I'm still throwing subsurface flies in most scenarios, because sometimes they're just unwilling to take a topwater fly. Yes, before I have people blowing up the comment section, carp do feed on the surface. You can catch them with surface flies. However, most of your fishing is going to be below the surface. So, if you're going to be targeting carp, a fluorocarbon leader is a must, and shorten it up. There's 2 reasons why this leader needs to be shorter. One is when you're in close, dipping into fish. You might not even be casting. You might actually spot a fish close up, and you'll look and see, position yourself behind vegetation, watch their feeding behavior, and then dip in at the right moment to present that fly directly in front of its feeding zone. Having that 6-foot leader when you're presenting at close range is going to enable you to have a cushion of fly line outside the tip of your fly rod. This is so important. When you set the hook, you're going to have a little bit of extra give, and you'll immediately be able to take the fish on the reel or let line slip through your hands so that you don't snap that fish off before you even have a shot at fighting it. When you are presenting to fish that are right in front of you, where you've positioned yourself behind vegetation, you've done a little bit of recon, and you're sneaking up on these fish and dipping in, if you have no fly line outside of the front of your rod tip, and there's no cushion there because you've got too long of a leader, the tension will be intense when you set the hook on those fish, and you will snap them off. So when you set the hook on a fish at close range, if you do not have a cushion of fly line outside the tip of your fly rod, the knots in your leader can get caught in your guides, and under intense stress from the hook set and then a surging run up front from a big carp, it could break your rod or immediately snap you off, and you're not fighting any fish in either scenario. Another reason why you need a short 6-foot fluorocarbon leader when you're fly fishing for carp is for the net. So right at the beginning, before the hook set, it prevents you from snapping fish off at close range. And then when you get to the net portion of your fight and you're ready to land that big fish that you've just spent all this time fighting and presenting to, now you don't have to do crazy acrobatics, pushing that fly rod all the way back behind you at crazy angles to try to attempt to swing in a larger fish into the net. Now you've got 3 extra feet where you don't have to go deep behind yourself just to be able to net that fish. And the same principle applies. If you've got a cushion of fly line outside the rod tip, you're not going to break fish off when they see you and see the net and inevitably go for a surging run. So you're going to be able to have a higher hookup percentage, and you're going to increase the ability to get that fish in the net and not have them snap you off at the last second, or just have trouble getting them in the net to begin with. You don't think that 3 foot makes a difference until you've got a trophy fish right in front of you and you can see that hook getting ready to get pulled out of its mouth because you've lost tension or you've had to do something unorthodox to get that fish in the net. Trust me, it'll happen to you, and you'll leave me a comment below if it's happened to you before, where you've lost a big fish because you had too much leader and you had to do something crazy to try to net it, and inevitably the hook came out and your window of opportunity is gone. So keep your leader short. A 6-foot fluorocarbon leader made out of 4 feet of 15-pound fluorocarbon down to 2 feet of 10-pound fluorocarbon will serve you in many scenarios when you're targeting these fish. It doesn't have to be super pretty, but it needs to be durable, because you're going to be raking that leader through sticks, rocks, mud. Those fish are going to run you through pods of vegetation, get you tangled up. There's going to be algae. The water is filthy, so you're going to beat your leader up. So it needs to be fluorocarbon. And fluorocarbon sinks and becomes nearly invisible under the surface of the water. And you will have no problem getting fish to take your fly, and you'll be effectively able to set the hook and net those fish. Okay, so as I go through this next tip, I'm going to be throwing up some pictures in the corner of the screen for you to check out these flies that I tie for carp. Just take a look and pay attention to how I construct the flies, their shape, the materials, and also the hook selection as I go through this. All right, tip number 2. With your flies, take your traditional carp nymphs and trout nymphs and beef them up just a little bit. By beefing them up and making them with just a slightly larger profile than what you're probably comfortable with, or maybe what you're used to, using breathable materials, you will create a larger profile, a better meal that a fish will be able to see, especially in muddy water. So when you're using your earth tones and you're doing your browns, your blacks, your tans, olives, when you're tying flies with those color variations and they're a little bit bulkier, the carp can see them better in muddy water, and you can see them better too, which is important, because if you can see the fly, you can see the take. And if you can see the take, you have a better chance of setting the hook cleanly on fish at closer range. Not only is the bigger profile going to help you see the fly and the carp see the fly, but those breathable materials like marabou, soft hackles, rubber legs, all those things that you incorporate into carp flies, they're going to move and undulate while the fly is doing nothing. When your fly's on the bottom, those materials breathe. The water doesn't even have to have any current, just the water's natural motion will let those materials breathe and move on their own subtly. The subtlest movements are the ones that get the carp's attention, because they're not used to seeing a bunch of fast, quick-moving food items other than crayfish and minnows when they're in the mood to eat them. A lot of the stuff that they eat moves fairly slowly on the bottom. That's why they move slow and sift with their mouth to be able to pull up those slow-moving prey items and get the easy meal. With your fly showing a little bit bigger profile and having breathable materials, they're going to see that as a serious food item, not something that they see typically. They're going to look at that and say, okay, there's a serious meal. I don't get too many shots at that. I'm going to take that. So just by bulking up your flies slightly, you'll have more opportunities to see the fly, get better interaction with those carp, get them to change their feeding behavior, because when they change and move on your fly and you see that, that's an indicator of a take. That's a cue for you to strike. So being able to change that fish's feeding behavior, either in trajectory, turning that fish slightly, so you can see that that fish is reacting to your fly, you don't really do that too often with microscopic trout nymphs. You're only going to be able to do that with a larger presentation, something that's going to get their attention and say, hey, this is a real meal, I need to take this. Not only is having a larger profile on your carp flies and having breathable materials important, but you also need to incorporate a sturdy hook into your carp flies. I see a lot of guys using thin wire hooks. I don't trust it. The reason that I don't trust it is because I've used trout nymphs before that are just souped up a little bit, but it's still a trout nymph hook. It's still lighter wire. Even if it's a heavier wire trout nymph hook, I've had carp bend them out. It does not matter that they have a soft mouth. These fish get big. They go on surging runs. They put a lot of pressure on your flies. At the hook point, there's a lot of pressure at times when you're fighting these fish, especially if you're up close and when you're setting the hook. So initially, right out of the gate, I want to take that out of the equation. By tying on a sturdier hook, I'm not saying you need to beef it up and use a crazy big hook, because that's not going to work. But you can bridge the gap between a traditional thin wire nymph hook that might seem sturdy, but under the weight and pressure of these fish, it's just not going to cut it. You need to bridge the gap between the lighter wire and the heavier wire and find something in between that suits your fishing style and your tying style that's going to help you hold these fish when they go on crazy runs, which they will do, guaranteed. All right, so the next tip that I have for you, tip number 3, it's really important. For me, especially when I target fish in creeks and rivers, the last thing that I want to do is have my fly just straight up and down, no movement. I'm already incorporating materials that move on my fly when I'm not doing anything to it. But in order to achieve maximum action, it is really important for you to use a loop knot when you connect it to your leader. It doesn't matter what loop knot you choose. There's a few different ones out there that are good. I actually use a perfection loop. So by incorporating a loop knot, when you attach your fly, you're going to achieve more action out of that fly when you're not doing anything, and it's going to help you save on leader material, because the way that you tie a fly on using a perfection loop, there's a way that you can do it that helps you save on leader material, and you can really effectively tie it quickly once you get good at it. Using the loop knot enables you to get more action out of your fly when it's at rest and after the strip. That fly is going to kick and waggle and move just a little bit extra, and that can be the difference between a fish taking your fly and rejecting it. So I always want to have the odds in my favor. If you're already taking the time to incorporate breathable materials into your carp flies so that you can achieve action when you're not imparting action to the fly, why would you cut your action down by your knot choice? It doesn't really make much sense. So if you want to achieve maximum action, you're always going to have to be doing some type of movement to a carp fly initially to get attention if you're not presenting right in front of them. When you cast, you're going to be dragging and dropping a lot of times into the fish's feeding zone, into that little pie plate around their head. And when you do that, that initial action may get their attention. Sometimes it doesn't, because they've thrown up such a prolific mud cloud. If they've done that, you might have to drag it a little bit or make a couple strips just to get their vision keyed in on that food item. I'm going to be doing a video on how to tie the perfection loop soon and how to use it in attaching your flies and leader construction. It's pretty easy. I'll be uploading that video soon, so stay tuned for that. All right, so these 3 simple tips that I've shared with you are just several ways that you can tidy up your carp fly fishing game, make things just a little bit better. You can improve the construction of your flies, beef up those hooks a little bit, shorten that leader up, and present it with a loop knot at the end. By doing that, you're going to increase your catch rates exponentially. I guarantee it. Doing the small things right is what's going to separate you as an angler from the rest of the pack, and you're going to be able to increase your catch rates. If you like this video, go ahead and hit thumbs up, and if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to my channel for more fly fishing and fly tying content. Thanks again for watching, everybody. Take care, and we'll catch you next time.